The abandoned Tech Fusion warehouse loomed against the sunset, its shadows stretching like accusing fingers across the pier. Jessica's Mercedes pulled up to the security gate, her tearful explanation to the guard about retrieving all company files, selling the performance perfectly. "He's watching through the cameras," Sarah whispered from her hiding place in the trunk, surrounded by tactical gear Patel had sourced. "Make it convincing." Inside the warehouse office, Marcus waited with two circle enforcers, their weapons visible under expensive suits. Elena sat bound to a chair, bruised but defiant. The warehouse floor below was busy with workers preparing for tomorrow's IPO celebration. "Darling," Marcus greeted Jessica with practiced concern. "You shouldn't be here. This is a delicate business matter." "Delicate?" Jessica's voice cracked expertly. "You killed Chen Ming. And now Elena. What happened to you, Marcus? This isn't the man I married." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The man you married was a facade, sweetheart, just like the one Sarah's been wearing lately. Speaking of which," he nodded to one of the enforcers who pressed a gun to Elena's head. "Where is she?" "Right here." Sarah emerged from the shadows behind them, Patel's surveillance training paying off. She held up a laptop. "Everything we have on Project Phoenix, just as requested." Marcus's enforcer moved to grab the laptop, but Sarah stepped back. "First, let Elena go." "You're not in a position to negotiate," Marcus sneered, but Elena chose that moment to speak. "The money's gone, Marcus." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Check your Cayman accounts." Marcus's mask slipped as he grabbed his phone, face contorting with rage as he saw the truth. While Jessica had played her grieving wife role, Sarah had used Elena's old access codes, never changed due to Marcus's arrogance, to empty his offshore accounts. "Kill them all," he snarled. Everything happened at once. Sarah dropped and rolled as the enforcers raised their weapons. Jessica threw herself at Marcus, sending them both crashing into a desk. Elena, who had been secretly sawing at her ropes with a hidden blade, broke free and tackled one enforcer. The second enforcer aimed at Sarah, but a shot rang out from the warehouse door. "Patel, holding a federal agent's badge. FBI, drop your weapons." Marcus broke free from Jessica, scrambling for the laptop containing the evidence. Sarah lunged after him, both of them crashing through the office's glass wall onto a catwalk above the warehouse floor. "It's over," Sarah gasped, gripping the railing as Marcus dangled from the laptop in her other hand. "Let go." "You'll never prove anything without this," he growled, his weight threatening to pull her over. Sarah looked into the eyes of the man she'd once loved, now a stranger. "That's a copy, Marcus. The originals are already with the FBI." His face contorted with fury as he realized the truth. With a final surge of strength, he tried to pull her down with him, but Jessica appeared, grabbing Sarah's waist and helping her break his grip. The laptop clattered to the warehouse floor, along with Marcus's last hope of escape. The encrypted email arrived at midnight. "I know who you are, Sarah Chen. Meet me at the Golden Gate Overlook. Come alone, or Marcus learns everything." Sarah's finger hovered over her phone, tempted to call Patel, but this was too delicate. After 3 weeks of carefully cultivating Jessica's trust over business dinners, she couldn't risk exposure. The drive to the Overlook felt eternal, her mind racing through contingency plans. A familiar figure stood at the railing, silhouetted against San Francisco's glittering skyline. Not Elena as she'd feared, but Jessica, trembling despite the mild night air. "How long have you known?" Sarah asked, maintaining her distance. Jessica turned, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Since the gala. The way you watched him, only someone he destroyed could look at Marcus like that." She pulled out a USB drive. "But I think you need to see this more than you need to expose me." The drive contained internal emails about Project Phoenix. It wasn't just a tech initiative, it was a sophisticated money laundering operation for a syndicate known as the Circle. Marcus had been using their tech company's legitimate business as cover for cleaning billions in criminal money. "He's planning to sacrifice me, just like he did to you." Jessica's voice cracked. "I found these drafts on his laptop. He's already building the paper trail to frame me for everything." Sarah studied the woman who had once been her best friend, then her worst betrayer. Why should I trust you? You helped him destroy me. Because I was stupid and in love. Jessica spat bitterly. Because I believed his lies about you being unstable, dangerous. Because by the time I realized what he really was, she pulled up her sleeve, revealing finger-shaped bruises. Well, you know how convincing Marcus can be. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Patel. Elena's contact intercepted new transfer orders. Moving timeline up. The Circle expects full payment in 48 hours. He's accelerating his plans, Sarah murmured. Jessica, when is the board meeting to approve the IPO? Tomorrow morning. Once it goes through, he'll have legitimate access to enough capital to pay off the Circle and disappear. Jessica's eyes widened. The evidence against me will be released right after. A car engine roared in the distance. Jessica paled. That's his Range Rover. He must have followed me. Sarah grabbed Jessica's arm, pulling her toward her car. Do you trust me? No, Jessica admitted, running alongside her. But I trust him even less. As they sped away, Sarah caught a glimpse of Marcus in her rearview mirror, his face illuminated by passing headlights. The mask of charm had vanished, replaced by something cold and predatory. The real game was beginning, and this time, lives were on the line. The harsh fluorescent light stabbed at Sarah Chen's eyes as consciousness slowly returned. Her head throbbed with each beep of the heart monitor, and the antiseptic smell of the hospital room made her stomach churn. Through her blurred vision, she could make out the headlines scrolling across the mounted TV screen. Tech Fusion CEO Marcus Zhang uncovers $1 million embezzlement scheme. Her own husband's voice cut through the fog of her confusion. I still can't believe she would do this to us, to everything we built together. Marcus's familiar face filled the screen, his expertly crafted mask of grief on full display. She watched, paralyzed, as security footage played beside his interview, grainy images of someone who looked exactly like her accessing the company's financial systems at 2 a.m., methodically transferring millions to offshore accounts. Mrs. Zhang, or should I say Ms. Chen? A detective stood at the foot of her bed, his expression a mix of disapproval and forced sympathy. Once you're cleared by the medical team, we have some questions about the discrepancies in Tech Fusion's accounts. Sarah tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. Her attempt to reach for the water glass sent sharp pain shooting through her ribs. 3 of them broken, she would later learn, from her accidental fall down the stairs at their office. The fall she had no memory of, just like she had no memory of the transfers they claimed she'd made. The door opened again, bringing the full board of directors from Tech Fusion. Their faces, once friendly at countless dinner parties and charity galas, now wore masks of stern disappointment. Richard Wee, the chairman, stepped forward with a thick manila envelope. Given the circumstances, he began, not quite meeting her eyes. The board has decided to take immediate action to protect the company's interests. He placed the envelope on her lap. Inside, she found divorce papers and a notice of termination, both citing her alleged criminal activities. Sarah's fingers trembled as she read the documents. The woman described in these papers was a stranger, a calculating criminal who had betrayed her husband's trust, embezzled company funds, and attempted to flee the country before her accident. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Email trails, bank records, witness statements from employees who claimed she'd been acting erratically for months. But Sarah knew the truth. The last thing she remembered before the fall was finding an encrypted file on Marcus's personal laptop, something about Project Phoenix, and a series of transfers to the Cayman Islands. She'd confronted him about it in his office. And then, nothing. As if reeling her thoughts, her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. The cameras caught everything that night. But somehow, the footage from his office is missing. Coincidence? Sarah closed her eyes, letting a single tear fall. Marcus hadn't just betrayed her, he'd orchestrated her complete destruction. And somewhere in the hospital's parking lot, he was probably already celebrating with Jessica, her supposed best friend, and the company's co-founder, their secret relationship now free to emerge from the shadows. The heart monitor's steady beeping increased as determination replaced despair. If Marcus thought she would quietly disappear into disgrace, He had gravely miscalculated. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of his nightmare. Sarah's hands trembled as she plugged the USB drive into her laptop, the blue light of the screen illuminating her face in the dark apartment. The files loaded, revealing a folder labeled Phoenix's Prey. Inside were hundreds of documents, each meticulously organized with timestamps and annotations. "My God," she whispered, clicking through the evidence. Dr. Raj Patil, as the mysterious man had signed his notes, had been tracking Marcus for over 5 years. Financial records showed a pattern, promising tech startups, strategic marriages, and devastating accidents that left his partners taking the fall for massive fraud schemes. A photo appeared on screen, a woman with fierce eyes and a confident smile. Elena Rodriguez, Marcus's first wife, disappeared after uncovering irregularities in company accounts. Read the caption: "Body never found. Case status: unsolved." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Coffee?" "Apo." 20 minutes later, she sat across from Dr. Patil in an all-night cafe far from her usual haunts. His casual demeanor had vanished, replaced by intense focus. "You're not just a forensic accountant, are you?" Sarah asked, studying his face. "Let's say I have a particular interest in bringing down financial predators," he replied, sliding a tablet across the table. "The metadata from their wedding photos, as promised." Sarah's breath caught. The photos of Marcus and Jessica's Caribbean wedding had been taken 6 months before her accident, but they'd been carefully edited and stored until the right moment. They were together all along. "Marcus dying doesn't leave things to chance," Patil explained, pulling up more documents. "Every accident, every frame-up, every destruction of reputation, it's all orchestrated months in advance. But you," he paused, looking at her intently, "you're different. You noticed the Phoenix files. You got closer than anyone to exposing him." "And Elena?" Sarah asked, dreading the answer. "Officially, missing. Unofficially, he pulled up security footage from an airport in Buenos Aires, dated 2 weeks ago. The same fierce-eyed woman, older but very much alive, boarding a private jet. She's been gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. She thinks you're the key to bringing him down." Sarah leaned back, mind racing. "Train me," she said suddenly. "Show me everything you know about forensic accounting, about tracking digital footprints. I need to understand exactly how he does this." Patil smiled for the first time. "Training starts tomorrow." "But Sarah," his expression turned serious, "Marcus isn't just a fraudster. The money he's been moving, I think he's involved with something much bigger. Are you sure you want to pull this thread?" Sarah thought of the hospital, of her shattered reputation, of Elena, and God knew how many other victims. Her voice was steel when she answered, "I'm not his prey anymore. I'm his reckoning." Dawn found Sarah and Jessica in Patil's secure office, surrounded by monitors displaying Project Phoenix's complex web of transactions. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but neither woman noticed, too absorbed in unraveling Marcus's digital empire. "Wait," Jessica pointed at a recurring pattern in the code. "I've seen this before. The night of your accident, you mentioned finding encrypted files. They look just like this." Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing dates. "These transfers, they align perfectly with 3 other accidents in companies Marcus was involved with, all of them right before major circle payments." Patil burst through the door, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "We have a problem. Chen Ming was found dead in his hotel room." Sarah's blood ran cold. Chen had been their inside source at the bank, secretly tracking the circle's transactions. "How?" "Officially, heart attack, but his laptop with the tracking software is missing." Patil pulled up a security feed. This was taken an hour before his death. The grainy footage showed Marcus entering Chen's hotel, carrying a briefcase. 20 minutes later, he left without it. "He's tying up loose ends," Jessica whispered, hands shaking as she checked her phone. "The board approved the IPO. We have less than 24 hours before everything goes public." Sarah's phone lit up with an incoming call, Marcus's number. She put it on speaker. "Hello, Sarah." His voice was smooth as silk. Or should I say Claire Morgan? Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own wife behind that blonde eye job? Jessica grabbed Sarah's arm, pointing at her laptop screen. Bank alerts were popping up. Someone was accessing their emergency accounts. I have to admire your dedication, Marcus continued. Turning Jessica against me was a nice touch. But did you really think I'd let her access those files without tracking her? Everything you have is compromised. It's over, Marcus. Sarah kept her voice steady. We have enough to expose everything. His laugh sent chills down her spine. Do you? Check your email, sweetheart. I just sent you something interesting. The video attachment showed Elena Rodriguez, very much alive, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. A masked figure held today's newspaper in front of her. She reached out to you, didn't she? Tried to help? Marcus's voice hardened. You have 1 hour to deliver everything you've gathered on Project Phoenix, or your fellow survivor won't survive the night. The line went dead. Sarah looked at Jessica, then Patel, seeing her own horror reflected in their faces. They had all the evidence needed to destroy Marcus, but Elena's life hung in the balance. He's bluffing, Patel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. Then she noticed something in the video's background, a reflection in a window, showing a familiar skyline. No, she said slowly, a plan forming? He's not bluffing. But neither am I, Jessica. How good are you at playing the grieving wife? 3 months after the hospital, Sarah stood in her new home, a studio apartment in the rougher part of town, where nobody asked questions. The walls were thin enough to hear her neighbor's TV, and the flickering fluorescent light in the kitchenette cast shadows on the water stains creeping down from the ceiling. This was what rock bottom looked like, a former tech CEO reduced to working graveyard shifts at the 24-hour Lucky Star diner. Her phone buzzed. Another blocked number. She'd stopped answering those weeks ago, tired of reporters asking for her side of the story. The news cycle had moved on anyway, especially after photos of Marcus and Jessica's intimate Caribbean wedding surfaced on social media. The timestamp on the pictures was just 2 weeks after her hospitalization. At least they waited until the divorce was final, Sarah muttered, scrolling through the comments beneath the wedding photos. Former friends and colleagues gushed about the perfect couple. Even her own mother had liked the post, adding a heart emoji. The betrayal ran deep enough to sever blood ties. The roach that scuttled across her second-hand coffee table barely fazed her anymore. Sarah was more focused on the laptop screen in front of her, watching her bank account dwindle. Her assets were frozen pending investigation, and Marcus's legal team had somehow managed to block her access to their joint accounts for evidence preservation. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had stolen millions had left her scraping by on diner tips. During her late shift that night, Sarah noticed him again. The man in the charcoal suit who'd been coming in every night this week. Always her section, always ordered the same thing, black coffee and apple pie. He never looked up from his notebook, but she'd caught him watching her reflection in the diner's windows. More coffee? She asked, approaching his table with the pot. He finally looked up, dark eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Tell me, Ms. Chen, did you notice anything unusual about the Project Phoenix files before your accident? The coffee pot slipped from her hand, shattering on the linoleum. Her new manager would dock her pay for that, but she barely registered the thought. Who are you? Instead of answering, he slid a USB drive across the table. The camera in your office wasn't the only one recording that night. But be careful who you trust with this information. Marcus's reach is longer than you think. Just ask his first wife, if you can find her. Before Sarah could respond, he stood and dropped $100 bill on the table. For the coffee and the cleanup. And Ms. Chen, check the timestamp on their wedding photos again. Pay attention to the metadata, not just the posted date. He walked out into the neon-lit night, leaving Sarah holding the USB drive with trembling fingers. First wife? She'd never heard of Marcus being married before. But then again, she was beginning to realize she'd never really known Marcus Dang at all. 2 months of intensive training with Dr. Patel had transformed Sarah's tiny apartment into a command center. Monitors displayed financial data streams, while the walls were covered in flowcharts tracking Marcus's empire. Her waitress uniform hung in the corner like a shed skin, a reminder of how far she'd come. "Your new identity is ready," Patel announced, handing her a sleek leather portfolio. "Meet Claire Morgan, Harvard Business School graduate and rising star consultant. Your background will withstand any scrutiny Marcus's people throw at it." Sarah, now Claire, examined her reflection in the mirror. Gone was the mousy brown hair and casual style. In their place, a sophisticated blonde with sharp designer clothes and sharper eyes. The transformation had cost most of Elena's seed money, but it was worth every penny. "The Chang Foundation's charity gala is tonight," Patel said, pulling up the guest list. "Marcus and Jessica will be there." "Remember." "I know," Sarah interrupted, applying her lipstick with steady hands. Claire Morgan never heard of Sarah Chen. She's just an ambitious consultant looking to network with Silicon Valley's elite. The gala was being held at the same hotel where Sarah had once celebrated her own wedding to Marcus. The irony wasn't lost on her as she glided through the crowd, playing the role of the confident newcomer. She caught glimpses of her targets. Marcus' charming investors, Jessica hanging on his arm like a trophy. "That dress is stunning," came a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Jessica herself, champagne in hand. "I don't think we've met, Jessica Zhang." "Claire Morgan," Sarah replied smoothly, her heart pounding behind her practiced smile. "I couldn't help noticing your company's impressive Q3 results. The market clearly loves what you're doing with Project Phoenix." Jessica's smile flickered for just a moment. "You follow our work?" "Investment opportunities are my specialty," Sarah said, noting the slight tremor in Jessica's hand. "Though I find the human element equally fascinating. For instance," she nodded toward Marcus, now deep in conversation with the CEO of a rival firm. "Your husband's leadership style is quite unique." "You have no idea," Jessica muttered, then caught herself. "I mean, yes, Marcus is one of a kind." Sarah's trained eye caught everything. Jessica's nervous glances at Marcus, the way she kept touching her collar, the slight smudge of concealer on her wrist. The predator had found a new prey. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patel. "Elena's contact confirmed. Marcus is moving money again. Same pattern as before." Sarah excused herself gracefully, but Jessica caught her arm. "Have dinner with me next week," she blurted out. "To discuss investment opportunities." Walking away, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The foundation was laid. The real game was about to begin. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the podium of TechFusion's renovated conference hall. Hundreds of eyes fixed on her as cameras flashed. The company's new direction under her leadership had made headlines. Phoenix returns. From corporate scandal to ethical innovation. "Today marks the launch of the Chen Rodriguez Foundation," she announced, sharing a meaningful look with Elena, who sat in the front row. "Our mission is simple: to support and protect victims of financial fraud and domestic abuse. To show them that rock bottom isn't the end, it's the foundation for something stronger." In the audience, Jessica dabbed at her eyes. After testifying against Marcus, she'd thrown herself into reforming the company's ethics policies. Their rekindled friendship, forged in fire, had emerged stronger than before. Patel, or rather, Special Agent Raj Patel, sat beside her, his FBI badge now worn openly. The task force he built around Marcus's case had uncovered dozens of similar predators, leading to a nationwide crackdown on corporate fraud schemes. "Marcus Zhang's sentencing today isn't just about punishment," Sarah continued, her voice steady. "It's about transformation. Every life he tried to destroy has become a catalyst for positive change." The headlines flashed on the screen behind her. TET CEO sentenced to 30 years. Marcus had finally faced justice, his empire of lies crumbling as victims came forward. The Circle's leadership had fallen with him, their international network exposed by Elena's meticulous records. After the presentation, Sarah found Elena waiting in her office, once Marcus's lair, now transformed into a bright, open space overlooking the bay. "Ready for your flight?" Sarah asked, hugging her fellow survivor. Elena nodded. "The Buenos Aires office opens next week. We already have 3 tech companies interested in our corporate transparency consulting." And the support groups. Growing every day. Turns out there are a lot of us out there, people who needed someone to believe their story. A knock at the door revealed Jessica and Patel. The reporters are gone, Jessica announced. Time for that dinner you promised. As they walked to the elevator, Sarah caught her reflection in the glass. Not the broken woman from the hospital, not the vengeful Claire Morgan, but someone new, someone stronger. You know, Patel said softly, taking her hand, when I started tracking Marcus 5 years ago, I never expected to find love. Sarah finished, smiling. Their relationship had grown naturally from trust and shared purpose, healing old wounds. Justice, he corrected, then grinned. Love was a bonus. Outside, San Francisco's fog was rolling in, but the setting sun still painted the sky in brilliant colors. Sarah thought about the long journey from that hospital bed to here, from victim to survivor to advocate. You really never suspected, Jessica asked as they reached their cars, about Patel being FBI. Sarah laughed. I was a bit busy suspecting everyone else. Sometimes the best allies are the ones you least expect. Elena raised an eyebrow at Patel. You're still buying dinner, Agent Romance? As they drove toward the restaurant, Sarah felt the last weights lift from her shoulders. Marcus had tried to write her ending, but he'd only penned her beginning. The real story, her story, was just getting started, and this time, she was the author.